We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
The fire got their attention, but it doesn't seem to be the source or an area where major protests were happening. So this fire may have been set with a small group that may have walked away, or just maybe a small group of people. As we mentioned, this protest is very spread out. At times we've seen bigger crowds and then these smaller crowds that are popping up. But this is devastating for a lot of people to be witnessing right now.
Yeah, and those flames are very close to trees nearby. And we do see, it is very difficult to see right now. It's almost 10 o'clock. It's hard to see what's going on, but we do see some people not too far from where those fires are going on right now. And again, this is happening near the College Football Hall of Fame in downtown Atlanta. So as police have moved the crowd away from the CNN Center more and more, we are seeing them go in a different direction. There's the Embassy Suites right there, not too far from where those fires are taking place. And we're seeing more and more crowds that have drifted away from the CNN Center and from Centennial Olympic Park and moved in other directions.
We're not seeing any emergency vehicles responding to that fire right now. I think that's interesting. The city emergency services are probably stretched thin right now with the amount of fires that they've had to deal with and crowd control and just really trying to maintain a level of peace that has grown out of control at certain times, but just really trying to channel those resources. It is very interesting to see how large this fire is and how many trees are near that area as well.
And Aisha, Jeff and I were talking earlier in the evening about how this area is such an attraction for tourists. There are so many things there that people go to and enjoy, in addition to those that call, those of us that call Atlanta home. You see the hotel right there, the college football there as well. So we're going to continue to follow this situation right now. You can follow along with us. We'll be right back.
Protests have grown to a level that have reached very violent proportions as you are taking a look at what we know to be at least one vehicle on fire right now. It is not the first fire. We do see an ATL fire department truck moving in right now to hopefully address what can become a very violent and harsh.
مرحبا، اسمي عمران دقنيش. كان عمري 3 سنين ونص لما ضربوا الغارات الجوية الروسية على حلب. أكيد شفتوني هديك الليلة في سيارة الإسعاف يوم 17/8/2016، واليوم أنا أفضل بكتير. أنا صورت هذا الفيديو عشان أسأل عيلتي شو اسم أمي، إذا ممكن أي شخص يساعدني أنا بقدره كتير. من فضلكم أروني شخص أحضنه زي أبويا محمد الخير، أبو علي، أخواتي رؤى وتقي وعبد الله. أنا لسه ما بعرف اسم أمي، رجاء ساعدوني في معرفته. أحب كل من يهتم به وما زال يريد أن يعرف كيف هي عائلتي في حلب. لن أنسى أبدا لطفكم. مع السلامة.
Across the street there on Marietta. So that is essentially where this is going. If you are just joining us, trying to comprehend exactly what it is you are seeing, again, this is downtown Atlanta, where we have seen these protests that have been ongoing since about 4 o'clock this afternoon. They started in front of the CNN Center. They escalated from there with defacing the CNN logo, the sign out front, then breaking windows. Then it was on to 9 different police cars a few hours later, torching one there. Protesters also making their way onto I-75, stopping traffic there, forcing the authorities to clear the pathway for motorists. So here we are now, a little bit after 10 o'clock, and again, we are looking at an escalation of violence with a number of vehicles on fire.
No different than other cities that are feeling rage and anger and frustration over what we have witnessed in this country, all the way to Denver, to New Orleans, and also to Houston, with those large crowds gathering right now. I am joined tonight by Jeff Hollinger. We are also going to bring in Up Late co-anchor Ron Jones as well. Jeff, here in Atlanta, what are you thinking about what we are seeing as we go into the 7th hour of these protests?
Well, I think there's great concern about, what is the end game on this? Certainly, I think we have sat here now for 7 hours watching this unfold. We began with a sense of optimism when it was peaceful around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but that peace was then disturbed, and it has been in full throttle ever since, with according to Atlanta police, using BB guns on police, using bricks, using bottles. We have seen vehicles on fire, an Atlanta police cruiser earlier in the night, and we have seen a Georgia Tech police vehicle also set ablaze. So 3 vehicles. We saw 9 Atlanta police cruisers that were damaged through this melee. Symbolism of the College Football Hall of Fame is part of that, and seeing that destruction tonight is something that pains everyone. All right, protests move into its 7th hour right now. We are joined on the telephone now by Cortez Stafford from Atlanta Fire. Mr. Stafford, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Jeff Hollinger here. Give us an update as to where the department stands right now as we are looking at these vehicles currently on fire at Centennial Olympic Park near Embassy Suites.
So we've had a couple vehicle fires this evening. They have been law enforcement vehicles, to include Atlanta Police Department and also a Georgia Tech vehicle. We've also had a report of a fire at the McCormick and Smith restaurant there at the corner of Centennial Olympic Park and Marietta Street. Fortunately, law enforcement officers, APD, were able to get in there and stop it from getting bigger. So when we arrived on scene, they were able to just kind of knock it down. But we did have multiple vehicles burning at Park Avenue, I believe, in Marietta. And when our units arrived on scene, we could not get access to those vehicles due to the crowd throwing objects, breaking windows on our fire vehicles, and just overall overrunning the area. APD finally did come in and tear gas the area and disperse the crowd, but we still could not get out there and properly extinguish those vehicles.
Sergeant Stafford, how concerned are you as we go into the rest of the night? I distinctly remember last night from Minneapolis when the 3rd precinct caught fire. They were saying there was threats of gas lines being out there. When people are setting these fires, they have no idea. They don't have the intel that you guys have about what is surrounding them.
I can tell you, those vehicle fires were extremely close to the large Embassy Suites hotel. That was our major concern. Once we saw those vehicles were not a threat to set the hotel on fire, we had to let them burn and move on to a better objective. So we had to back out of there and retreat. But that's a big concern, is that we get one of these buildings on fire, and it's something that we can't contain or we can't get to. So we're staying aware of it. Our Joint Operations Center is open. We're working closely with APD and other law enforcement agencies downtown to make sure we get a handle and a quick jump on anything that might light off.
Sergeant, what about the safety of Atlanta Fire and Rescue amidst the chaos, amidst the protesters?
So it's a big deal. At this point, they don't care really who you are. Like I said, we were attacked with rocks, sticks. People were throwing objects. People were jumping on our fire vehicles. Once we try to make a move to go to a fire scene or intersection, we definitely move with law enforcement if at all possible. And we coordinate that with our Joint Operations Center to make sure that we move and they're protecting us if we're trying to fight fire or if we're trying to extinguish a vehicle fire somewhere.
And I'm sure it has not been.
It was like
let's go to Hope Ford right now. Hope Ford on the ground right now. Let's go to.
That were there.
We're going to pop in and go to Hope Ford right now, Ron.
Okay. Shh. Oh, go.
All right, so our crews are getting out of the way right now as we see the tear gas and the smoke bombs going off. People jumping fences and trying to get out of the way of the tear gas. Crews moving in within the first 3 minutes of this, really about just 30 seconds into the 9 o'clock hour. Plumes of smoke and tear gas filling the air downtown, Ron, as they try to get these crowds out of there.
Absolutely, and you know, if I were our crew members right now, especially with Hope, I'd probably get out of there because she's not wearing a gas mask. And I tell you what, Aisha, I have tasted that gas many times before in the military, and also within the police department. And there's nothing you can do. It burns your eyes, it burns your throat. There's no way that you.
مرحبا، اسمي عمران دقنيش. كان عمري 3 سنين ونص لما ضربوا الغارات الجوية الروسية على حلب. أكيد شفتوني هديك الليلة في سيارة الإسعاف يوم 17/8/2016، واليوم أنا أفضل بكتير. أنا صورت هذا الفيديو عشان أسأل عيلتي شو اسم أمي، إذا ممكن أي شخص يساعدني أنا بقدره كتير. من فضلكم أروني شخص أحضنه زي أبويا محمد الخير، أبو علي، أخواتي رؤى وتقي وعبد الله. أنا لسه ما بعرف اسم أمي، رجاء ساعدوني في معرفته. أحب كل من يهتم به وما زال يريد أن يعرف كيف هي عائلتي في حلب. لن أنسى أبدا لطفكم. مع السلامة.
Good evening, I'm Aisha Howard joining you here at the top of the 9 o'clock hour. As the clock strikes 9 p.m. straight up, a curfew is now in effect for the city of Atlanta, beginning at 9 p.m. going until tomorrow morning at sunrise. If you don't know, this is the warning. Just driving into our Midtown studios, it was all over billboards all around the city. The mayor saying this curfew is indeed going into effect. We are still awaiting to see how this is all going to play out. We are giving you multiple views and vantage points tonight A much different scene from last night. By this time, there were fires and multiple fires. Looking in the upper right-hand side of your screen, you see there have been a couple of items tossed around and people are starting to scatter. Jeff Hullinger and Ron Jones joining me now. We are seeing more tear gas being deployed because, according to authorities, you're going to get arrested right away, as we're seeing go down right now. Tear gas being deployed, all signs, Jeff, pointing to it is time to go.
Well, 2 hours ago, during the news conference with the mayor and the chief of police, it was no nonsense. They were talking about the tragedy.
Rest Fest out there when she was out there speaking with those crowds, but things have certainly changed since that point. We have seen a lot happen since that time, and we heard the chief and saw her out there in the midst of a fairly large crowd talking and speaking with the people, listening to them out there. Since then, we have seen that graffiti, that vandalization of the CNN sign. We saw those windows broken there and at the restaurant, McCormick's. And Jeff, you know, you mentioned Hawks games, but people frequent that area. That's a place that people go.
Oh, it's a great area, great fun area, yeah.
Yeah, whenever we have concerts and all sorts of things, it's a quick place for people to grab a bite.
Yeah, you got Waffle House right up there.
Exactly, so there are various businesses in this area, and then we hope that the rest of them remain intact, and as much so as possible, because as you mentioned, Chief Shields said they did not want to see any property damage, and they wanted this to remain safe. I will echo, Jeff, that you mentioned earlier that you thought that this might have been the thinnest that we've seen the crowd since the protest returned to this area. And we did get started around 4:15. They met at the Centennial Olympic Park, marched down to the state capitol, and then returned here. And some organizers, as Hope mentioned, Gerald Griggs, are saying that that was the end of the main protest, the peaceful protest, and that some of the folks that are out there now are separate individuals. Again, Hope Ford saying that she had seen additional vehicles arrive in the area. So we may be seeing a situation where more people are coming out there as the day has gone on as well.
There's always the great concern with these kinds of protests. In the early hours, in the early time of the protest, there seems to be more of a cohesiveness of the group, but as the hours begin to drag on, that's when law enforcement and municipalities will tell you that they are greatly concerned, because most of the escalation of violence and property damage oftentimes comes late into the evening hours. And the question that we certainly had been posing during the course of the protest was just what exactly would the posture of APD be? How long would they continue to watch this? How long would they tolerate it? How long would they accept in mass people on the streets of downtown Atlanta? With a bullhorn around 5:15, Atlanta police announced that they wanted people off the streets. They wanted them on the sidewalks, and they were demanding that that occur. And that simply did not happen. The protesters did not have any of that, and it was not long thereafter that we saw this escalate into the destruction of the police car and the damage to 9 of them. The other question certainly that many people have right now outside of Atlanta on a Friday night like this is the blockage of the interstate near the downtown area. 75, 85 right now. There has been a assemblage of protesters, a lot of police presence, and again, you've heard from Crash Clark over the last few minutes, who have given us an update that you're going to have to avoid that area because they have not cleared it, nor do we have any sense of when they will. Ron Jones.
A shocking and pitiful image has given a new face to the war raging in Syria. So many have seen and shared pictures of this traumatized little boy after his rescue following an airstrike in Syria's largest city. He's being treated in the same secret underground hospital we took you inside earlier this week. And as our Richard Engel reports, he's brought new attention to a war many accuse the world of ignoring.
His name is Umran Daqnesh, just 5 years old, and his feet barely hung over the edge of a seat in an ambulance. Dazed, he didn't cry as he wiped away blood and the dust from a building that collapsed around him in an airstrike. His silence somehow reminded the world today of its silence in the face of the atrocities in Aleppo. Umran was pulled out alive Wednesday. 5 other children died when the building they were in was hit during the relentless Syrian-Russian offensive on rebel-held areas in Aleppo. The image of Umran's face spread like wildfire on the internet. One tweet called him the real representative of the Syrian people.
Stop killing Syrian innocent people, civilian. Our children need to live in peace.
The doctor who treated Umran said today there were many more severe cases no one is paying attention to.
We need to protect our hospital, our doctors, our medical workers from airstrike.
Umran was recovering. His family now wants to escape. The same choice another boy's family made a year ago, Aylan Kurdi, whose body washed up on a beach. He too was a symbol of Syria's youngest victims. Now there's a new one. Tomorrow there may be another. Richard Engel, NBC News.
يا